Joe, how's it going?
Hey, Doug, what's up, man?
Doing good. Doing
Nice,
good.
nice to meet you.
Likewise. Likewise.
I like your neon back there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, hey, man,
Yeah.
where are you coming out of?
I'm in the Portland, Oregon area. So I live in a town called Newberg, which is over in like Oregon, Pinot Noir area.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're into beer and wine, but if you are, then this is the place.
Yeah, no, well, I'm a jazz radio host as well as hosting this podcast, Famous Interviews, and there's a really good drummer that's up there. His name is Todd Straight. He's like amazing, but
Okay.
he's kind of gone back and forth between Portland and Kansas City. So, but Portland's one of those places in my 20s. I took off with all my friends to go across the western portion of the United
Hmm.
States. I'm in Kansas City, and we
Okay.
didn't get to Oregon. And I always think about that. I mean, we got everywhere else, but for some reason we didn't get to Portland.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's on my
Upper
list.
left USA. That's where we're at, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
That's how I describe the Pacific Northwest to people on the East Coast, is I just say upper left.
Yep, that's it. Just start pointing.
There's a state between Seattle and San Francisco. That's where I live.
That's it. You're right there. That's the gray area.
Yeah,
For sure.
exactly. It's a gray area, the place you fly over on your way to Asia.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, man, thanks for taking a minute out. And before we get into your life and career, I want to
Yeah.
know, how did you survive COVID? How did you get through the last 3 years, and how has it changed you?
Well, so that's kind of a flashpoint in my life because I got laid off from my 20-year corporate career like right at the beginning of COVID. And so at the time, I think my son was in fifth grade, my daughter was in eighth grade. Both of them flipped on to full-time remote. My wife was full-time at home, so I got laid off and we had no income. We had a house, kids in private school, pets, and had to figure out what to do.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I've gone through kind of a number of fits and starts, and that's I've kind of gone on to what I call my hustle career now, which is where I'm juggling about four or five different things, kind of really, basically playing all the hands until I really get traction with one, and then I'm going to start consolidating down and really, and doubling and tripling down. But I
Yeah.
think that's kind of one of the, you know, a lot of times my mood is based on what I'm thinking about, because like a lot of people say, okay, you got to pick your thing and focus. I'm like, yeah, but how do you know it's the right thing?
Right.
And
Right.
so that's the thing, is because most things that you want to do, despite what all of the, because the thing is, like, if somebody's made a whole bunch of money, people online, people will listen to what they say, even if they're spouting nonsense. Because the thing is, most things you're doing that are worthwhile, you won't make money at right away. So what that, because it's like this, it's like they say, the only way to get rich quick is by selling people get rich quick schemes. So if you're doing something that's legit, it's not going to be profitable on day one. So that means that if you're trying to go from like a kind of, a vanilla square corporate type of career to more of like a life design hustle career, you're going to have an indeterminate amount of time where it feels like nothing is working. And you just haven't put enough time into it yet to really know what the output is. And I think that's kind of, at least that's what I'm experiencing right now, is that you have to be willing to continue putting effort into a number of things until you really figure out what hits.
Yeah.
you know because like one of my, well, it's kind of funny, as a person he's a jerk, but as a business person he's brilliant. I absolutely love Peter Thiel and 0 to 1, but like one of the things that always sticks with me is the idea that every moment in business only happens once. So you cannot be successful or like highly successful doing the exact same thing as someone else. You will best place be second, best situation be second place. Most likely you'll be an also ran.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, that what that means is, what that tells me is there's not a formula.
Right.
Or it's like another thing Thiel says is that, every successful company is different and every failure is the same, and the reason they're the same is they don't make enough money to where they can do anything except grind every last cent that they can out of their customers and people.
Yeah, that's true. For sure. So let's get into these things that you do. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. One of the
Perfect.
kids looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
So my the thing that I do to pay the bills is I do boring training for a boring corporation, and the thing that I do that's more fun is I have a podcast where I talk with leaders about how they create value and grow their people, and I also am involved in a couple of different startups where we are trying to basically deploy either technology or either consumer tech or health tech to basically create exceptional value and change the business marketplace.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Astronaut.
Okay. All right. Well, you're still reaching for the stars.
Yeah, well, going there.
That's it. You're on the trajectory for
Yeah,
sure. So talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and how some of these seeds were planted into you to become who you are. Not just the incarnation of today, but like even the previous corporate
mhm,
incarnation. How did all this happen?
sure. Excellent question, by the way. So, I grew up in a town called Gresham, which is on the east side of Portland. So, in a very real sense, I'm a townie in that I've kind of lived in the Portland area my whole life. Now, the reason why is because I went to high school. I ended up doing Portland State for undergrad. Actually, I did 2 years at junior college and then Portland State because I was terrified of carrying any student loan debt out of college. And then I got out of Intel Corp out of Hillsborough, so I was able to stay fairly local. I was able to have a grown-up career and still sort of stay in the hometown. But kind of, as far as how I got to where I'm at, is that, I was born in 1977, so I'm a late Gen Xer, and all of us Gen Xers, or at least my perception is a lot of us Gen Xers, we grew up under the I guess I would say um, under the belief that there was a right way and a wrong way to do everything in life.
Yeah,
And so the right
I
way
get it.
is, study hard, get good grades, keep your nose clean, nose to the grindstone, go to college, make sure you don't spend too much money so you don't have to carry student loan debt, graduate, buy a house, get married, go to grad school, have kids, bigger house, blah, 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 blah. And I just did that whole thing, right? Promotion, bigger house, more stuff, private school, all that. And I had I had the outside trappings of what looked like a perfect life, right? When I got laid off in 2020, we're here in this. We have a 3-acre house in Oregon wine country. It's 3,800 square feet. We got 2 dogs, 2 cats, 8 chickens, right? 2 kids, private school. Sounds great, except when it all implodes, and you're like, holy shit, what? How am I going to deal with all this? And like all the people who are your connections on LinkedIn, and you reach out to them, they're like, "Oh, sorry, man, we're not hiring. I wish I could help you." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So, like when people say how big's your network, the number of connections you have doesn't matter. The question is, would they take your call, and then if they do take your call, would they actually help? And so that means regardless of how many followers you have, your network isn't that big, no matter who you are, because even if you're Warren Buffett, how many people could Warren Buffett call? Well, I mean, a lot of people would take Warren's call and probably give him as much as he asked for because they know they get it back and then some. But like, if you're not Warren Buffett, even if you're kind of a big deal, how many people could you actually call if you really needed help and they would help you?
Yeah,
It's not that many.
right. That's interesting. So who's been kind of an anchor, hero, role model for you in your life?
Oh, so that is a seriously deep question. I mean, for a long time, I would have said my dad, except upon introspection therapy. Not that I blame him, but my mom and dad are a part of why I have, are part of why I grew up so repressed. Now, with that said, they both provided a much better environment for me than they had, so I can't blame them because they did the best they could. Um, but I guess the big thing I've found is that it's it isn't so much that there is a person who I look toward, is that I try to pull pieces and insights off of everyone that I meet. Sometimes they are things to do, sometimes they are things not to do. But if you take that perspective, what that really means is you can learn something from pretty much every interaction if you're willing to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So as a podcast host and someone that's curious, if you can meet anybody alive right now on the planet and spend some time with them or even
Mhm.
interview them, who would it be?
Oh God. Well, okay. If I get anybody, I'm going Tony Robbins. I mean, I'm going straight to the top
Yeah,
because yeah, now assuming that I cannot make God reincarnate, it will
right.
be Tony Robbins.
There you go. So speaking of Tony Robbins and what he does for everybody, which is motivation, what
Mhm,
is your motivation? What is your spark? What gets you up? What gets you moving? What gets you through the day?
mhm. The thing for me is that I am looking to create a life I don't want to retire from. And I think there's a couple of aspects to that. So I have two kids. My daughter's now 17. She's going into her senior year. My son is 14. He's going into his freshman year. So we have to guide our children through their college times. But what I noticed was, during corporate career, the way that kind of, especially all of us Xers, boomers especially, but boomers have the benefit of, like, say, pensions, funded social security plan. Xers, we're not going to get any of that. I mean, and so, we grew up kind of thinking that all that stuff was still going to be there. And, at least, the millennials are like, okay, hey, you know what? I don't care about having a house. I already know there's going to be, so that the bubble had already been popped by the time the millennials grew up.
Yeah.
So they kind of have this more grounded sense of reality. And, whereas us Xers, we were all kind of brought up with, like, boomer expectations in, like, Gen YZ reality that, but anyway, but I digress. But the thing, kind of the mindset that I grew up with was, okay, well, you're supposed to get a really good corporate job and you're supposed to save a whole lot of money and put it into your 401ks. That way you can build up a giant pile of money so that when you ultimately get fired and can't get another job, that you can pay to support your lifestyle for however much longer you live. And I just never questioned that. I'm like, okay, well, that's what you're supposed to do. So I started doing it. And, whereas now I'm like, well, why is that the model? What if instead of that, I, go through some of that, uncertainty and that chaos and that hustle to make something that I don't want to retire from, that I like doing and I can do for as long as I want, then I can decide when I'm done. And I think that the thing is that for the younger cohort, for some of the younger millennials and Gen Z, I think that kind of thing really resonates with them. Now, the problem that I ran into is that I've spent 20 years of my adult life building up a boomer Xer lifestyle cost. And so trying to hustle while you're paying for all that stuff is a very exhausting proposition. But I am a very big believer in the Booker T. Washington quote that the measure of your achievement is not necessarily what you attain, but the obstacles you will overcome to get there.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, that's great too. Finding what you don't want to retire from. So up to this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, it's got to be kids. Got to be kids. They're great kids. My daughter and I, we are like super besties. She'll every now and then, if I'm actually not every now and then, like literally every day, she will come into my office and she'll start going with her stream of consciousness about whatever girl stuff is going on. And I absolutely love that we are just that we're that close. And I love
Yeah.
that I'm able to do scouts with my son. And because you're only going to get so much time. And I think that's kind of one of the things is there's, it's I think that it's really important to engage with kids at the right level. There's a temptation to, like, super helicopter. That's not helpful. There's also a temptation to, like, completely detach, and that's not helpful either. But, you only get one chance, and they're not around you for all that long. And unless you're extremely fortunate, then, you'll probably only see each other, a few times a year for once they adult and start moving out. So you gotta plant your seeds while it's you gotta plant your seeds in the season.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of youth, if you had a dream tonight, ran into the 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could give that version of you a piece
Mhm,
of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life, what would you
mhm.
tell that young version?
First thing I would say is, if you're going to have a job, uh, just start job. There's nothing wrong with jobbing, but do it to learn. Because one of the things that corporate jobs are really good for is they'll usually pay for you to learn as much as you're willing to learn. So do that to learn. And then once you've learned enough to go out on your own, just cut your lifestyle costs as close to zero as you can. And then just start hustling until you get to the thing you want.
So if you could witness any event in human history with your own eyes, what would you love to have seen firsthand?
Oh, that's a really good question. Let's see. Any event in human history. Well, do I get to come back or do I have to stay there?
No, no, you get to come back. You just get to see it and come back.
Okay. All right. Well, I was going to say considering I've gone to church my whole life, I would absolutely love to see the crucifixion and resurrection because that's something we celebrate in memoriam and then every Sunday and then and then in actuality every Easter. So
Yeah. That's a great one. So everyone out there has a perception of you. You have all these pockets of people, family,
Mhm.
friends, clients,
Yeah.
listeners, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That's a really good question. It's that's really that yeah, I'm really thinking about that because um I was brought up with this, or I don't know if I'd say brought up, maybe it's just self-imposed, but I have this personal limiting belief that you shouldn't self-promote too much, otherwise you're being arrogant. But what I like to think of myself as is, as a person who wants to create a lot of value for a tremendous amount of people, and who's finally figuring out that that includes myself too.
That's great. That's a great answer. So, Doug, if anyone out there wants to listen to your podcast, know more about you, find out anything about your world,
Yeah.
where can they go?
So it's just, the podcast is called People First Leaders. Word people first leaders, or go, and you can go to peoplefirstleaders.net. That'll have a link to the feed, or just look it up on Spotify, Apple, or and. But
Right on.
yep, it's at all the places.
Yeah, cool, man. Doug, thank you so much.
Thank
Again,
you.
again, I love that.